My name is Sam. I am a civil engineer. I build bridges, literally. Strong, reliable structures designed to last for decades. That's how I tried to be in life. My wife, Chloe, was an artist. She didn't build bridges, she burned them. In her art, of course. Vibrant and impulsive, she saw the world in colors that I, with my drawings and calculations, couldn't even imagine. We were like yin and yang, and I thought that was our strength. One evening, she introduced me to Damien. He was her old friend from art school, a charismatic guy with fiery eyes and a way with words that could sell sand in the desert. He was my complete opposite: designer sneakers, perfectly tousled hair, and the aura of a man who was about to change the world. Over dinner, he talked enthusiastically about his startup, Elysian Fields. It was supposed to be a revolutionary AI-based platform that created unique works of digital art. "We're not just generating images, Sam," he said, his eyes sparkling. "We're creating soul. This is the future of collecting." Chloe looked at him with such adoration that I felt a twinge in my chest. "Sam, you have to see this," she chirped. "Damien is a genius. His project is going to blow up the market. I've already invested, and you should too. This is our chance, honey." I was skeptical by nature. I believed in concrete and steel, not digital souls. But I believed Chloe. I saw how passionate she was about this idea, how she looked at me with hope. I chalked my jealousy up to fatigue. After all, I loved her and wanted her to be happy. "Okay," I said, pulling out my checkbook. "I'm in." I wrote a check for $100,000. It was our joint savings, which I had been putting aside for a down payment on a house. Damien accepted the check with a broad smile. "You won't regret it, Sam," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Welcome to the future." When he and Chloe hugged goodbye, their embrace seemed too long to me. Too intimate. But I dismissed the feeling again. I'm not the jealous type, am I? I'm an engineer. I can't just hand over money and forget about it. I need to see blueprints, calculations, proof of concept. A week later, I asked Chloe for the Elysian Fields business plan. "Oh, Sam, don't be a stickler," she dismissed. "Damien is a creative person. He doesn't like all this bureaucracy." But I insisted. Finally, she reluctantly sent me a PDF file. It was a beautiful, glossy presentation, full of big words and impressive renderings. But when I started reading it, my internal bullshit detector started going off. Analogy. It's like getting a blueprint of a bridge drawn in watercolor. Beautiful, but completely useless. The financial projections were pulled out of thin air, and the technical description of the AI's work was so vague that it could have been written by a freshman student. The list of key developers consisted of first names without last names and links to their profiles. I decided to check the company's registration. According to the documents, Elysian Fields Incorporated was registered at an address in the city center. Out of curiosity, I drove by during my lunch break. It wasn't a tech startup office. It was a mailbox at a 24-hour virtual office service, a classic sign of fictitious activity. A chill ran down my spine. In the evening, I tried to talk to Chloe. "Honey, I looked at the documents. There are a couple of things that bother me. For example, the legal address." She flared up. "God, Sam, can't you just believe in me? In us? You always ruin everything with your skepticism. Damien said it's temporary, to save money. You just don't understand how the startup world works. It's not your boring bridges." She accused me of trying to control her, of being jealous of her friend's success. The scandal was huge. In the end, she threw it in my face. "Maybe you just don't have the courage to take risks." And she left, slamming the door. I was left alone in the living room, and my vague suspicion began to turn into icy certainty. It wasn't about courage. It was about deception. After our argument, I realized that I could no longer trust Chloe. I had to dig deeper myself. I started with what I knew best: data analysis. I installed a program on our home router to monitor traffic. It wasn't difficult. And after a couple of days, I got what I was looking for. Chloe and Damien weren't using regular messengers to communicate, but a secure chat within some little-known game. They thought it was safe. They were wrong. I couldn't hack the chat itself, but I was able to track the IP addresses they were using. One of them led me to Damien's public social media profile, which Chloe had never mentioned. Their entire life was there. Photographs from trips I didn't know about. Dinners at restaurants where they were together. Comments full of hints and inside jokes. And one photo that finally made everything clear. They were standing on the beach, embracing each other, against the backdrop of the sunset. The caption read, "Another year with my one and only. Soon the whole world will be at our feet." The photo was taken 3 weeks ago. They weren't just friends. They were a couple. And they were playing a double game with me. The startup was a fiction. A decoy. A way to extract money from gullible people like me. My pain quickly turned into cold, calculating rage. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my feelings, my trust, my life. I wasn't going to just walk away. I was going to get everything back with interest. I started looking for other investors. The business plan they sent me included a list of partners. Most of the names were fictitious, but a few turned out to be real people. I found them through professional social networks. The first person I called was Marcus, a retired elderly doctor who had invested part of his retirement savings in Elysian fields. "Hello, Mr. Green," I began. "My name is Sam Carter. I'm also an investor in Damien's project." At first, he was wary. But when I started laying out the facts, about the virtual office, about the vague business plan, his tone changed. "I also felt that something was wrong," he admitted. "But my daughter was so impressed with this guy." Within a week, I contacted 3 more investors. The story was the same: charming Damien, an enthusiastic recommendation from someone close to them, and a check for a large sum of money. Among us were a young couple who had invested money they had saved for IVF, and a small business owner who had mortgaged her cafe. We were all victims of the same scam. I organized a meeting in the hotel conference room. When we all gathered around the table, the atmosphere was oppressive. People were depressed, angry, and felt humiliated. "We can go to the police," I said, looking around at them. "But it will take a long time, and there is no guarantee that we will get our money back. Damien and Chloe will simply declare bankruptcy and get away scot-free. But I have another idea." I looked at the calendar. In 2 weeks they had a big presentation planned to attract a new round of investment. It was their moment to shine. Their chance to hit the jackpot. "We'll go to that presentation," I said. "But not as investors. As judges and jurors. We'll give them a public beating they'll never recover from." Instead of despair, fire appeared in people's eyes. From a group of scattered victims, we were turning into an army. The next 2 weeks were like preparing for a military operation. We worked as a single mechanism. Marcus, a doctor, used his connections to obtain Damien's financial statements, which showed that all our money was going not to development, but to a luxurious lifestyle, renting sports cars, expensive hotels, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. Sarah, the cafe owner, turned out to be a former investigative journalist. She dug up Damien's past. It turned out that this was not his first scam. He left behind a trail of deceived partners and failed. Brilliant projects. My task was the technical part. I created a simple web page. On the main page was a timer counting down the time until the start of the presentation. Below it were photos of all of us, the defrauded investors, with short stories about what we had been saving money for that had been stolen from us. I prepared a presentation. Not glossy like theirs, but dry and full of facts. Screenshots of their correspondence. Photos of their vacations together. Financial reports showing where our money actually went. Each slide was a nail in the lid of their coffin. At home, I played the role of the reconciled husband. I apologized to Chloe for my skepticism. "You were right," I told her. "I was just scared. I'm really looking forward to the presentation. I'm sure you'll do great. She lit up. She believed me. She had no idea that her loving, boring husband was setting the stage for her to play her final role. The night before the presentation, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark and checked every detail, every slide, every link. Tomorrow, the bridges I had been building all my life would have to withstand the most important load. The hall was packed. Potential investors in expensive suits, journalists from tech publications, the city's elite. The air smelled of money and success. Chloe and Damien stood on stage, beaming. They were the king and queen of this ball. I sat in the front row with Marcus, Sarah, and the others. We were calm. Damien began his speech. He talked about the future, about revolution, about the digital soul. Beautiful images generated by a neural network flashed on the big screen behind him. The hall listened with bated breath. And now, he said, smiling, I want to give the floor to my muse, my partner, the person who believed in this dream from the very beginning. Chloe. Chloe approached the microphone. She looked like a goddess. Thank you, Damien, she began. When I first saw Elysian Fields, I realized it wasn't just a business. It was art. At that moment, I pressed a button on my laptop. The presentation on the big screen behind her was interrupted. Instead, our website appeared. A huge timer showed zeros. And below it were our faces. The faces of people who had been deceived. Silence fell over the room. Chloe froze, her smile frozen on her face. Damien turned around, his face white as chalk. I stood up. All eyes were on me. My name is Sam Carter. I said loudly and clearly. I am this woman's husband. And I am one of the first investors in this startup. I pressed the next button. The first slide of my presentation appeared on the screen, a screenshot of their love letters. A shocked gasp swept through the room. This project, I continued, switching slides, has nothing to do with technology. It's a scam. Here, take a look. These are bank statements showing where our money went. Checks from restaurants and hotel reservations appeared on the screen. And this is a list of Mr. Damien's previous projects. I spoke calmly, without malice. I was simply stating the facts. Each slide was a blow. Chloe stood on the stage like a statue, her face contorted with horror and humiliation. Damien tried to say something, but couldn't get the words out. When I finished, I looked directly at Chloe. You said I don't know how to take risks, I said. You're right. I don't take risks when it comes to the truth. The panic in the hall was indescribable. Journalists rushed to the stage, investors jumped out of their seats. The show was over. Chaos ensued. We, the army of the deceived, simply got up and silently left the hall. Our work was done. We didn't shout or accuse. We simply showed the truth. The next day, the story was all over the news. $1 million scam, Elysian Fields startup turns out to be a bubble. The police launched an investigation. Chloe and Damien's accounts were frozen. Their glittering world collapsed overnight. I filed for divorce that same day. Chloe tried to call, write, beg for a meeting. I didn't respond. What could she say to me? That it was a mistake? That she was sorry? Words had lost all meaning. A few months later, the court found them guilty of fraud. They were given real prison terms. Most of the money couldn't be recovered, they had already spent it. But that didn't matter. I sat in a cafe with Marcus and Sarah. We didn't get everything back, but we got our dignity back. We weren't victims anymore. We fought and we won. What's next, Sam? Marcus asked. I looked out the window. Life was bustling outside. I build bridges, I said and smiled. I think I'll just keep building bridges. Only now I'll check the foundation much more carefully. I took a sip of coffee. For the first time in a long time, it didn't taste bitter. It was just warm and strong. Just as it should be.